Scene one, take one.
Oh, hi. How you doing? I'm doing great. And today we're going to be talking about holes. So, if you've seen the movie, you already know what it's about. But if you haven't seen the movie, we're going to give the lowdown on it. So, Stanley Yelnats, yes, Yelnats is Stanley backwards, that's why his name is Stanley Yelnats. He is arrested for stealing a pair of nice tennis shoes from a famous baseball player who was going to give them to charity. And he's arrested, and he either has the option to go to jail or to go to Camp Green Lake. And he didn't know what Camp Green Lake was because he had grown up in a poor family. So he was like, oh, it might be like a summer camp. So he goes to Camp Green Lake. He's like, fine, I'll take that. And he gets there, and there's not even a lake. It's just completely desert, dried up, no plants, nothing. And so basically their motto at Camp Green Lake is you dig holes to make boys better, basically, which they have to dig a hole a day, and they're not looking for anything supposedly, they're just digging holes to build character. And Stanley's been there for a few days, he's met all his friends and stuff, and he starts to get the vibe, he's like, oh, I feel like we're looking for something. And one day he digs up a little gold tube or something, and he doesn't know what it is, but it has the initials KB written into it. And so he looks at it, he's like, oh, what's this? And he promised to give his friend, his name's X-Ray, promised to give his friend the tube if he had found it, because his friend was like, you know what, I've been here longer than you, don't I deserve to have it? So he gives it to his friend, and he turns it into Mr. Pendanski, and Mr. Pendanski's like, okay, you can have the day off, because if they find anything valuable, supposedly, they can have the day off. So X-Ray has the rest of the day off, and they were wondering, they were like, why did they care so much about the little gold tube? And then it goes into the story of the actual story of Green Lake, which is, there's this lady, her name was Kate Barlow. There was only one school in the whole neighborhood, because there used to be a lake there. There was only one school in the whole neighborhood. She was a teacher. And there was this black man who would go around selling onions, and had a bunch of onions, and onion orchard, I guess. And he was really sweet to Miss Kate, because she was very pretty. She was the prettiest lady in town. And she would buy his onions, and she just liked talking to him, so she would have him repair stuff on the schoolhouse. And one day, they kissed. Oh. And back then, it wasn't acceptable for people of different races to kiss. So when people saw them doing that, he was charged for a crime, and he was going to be hung the next day. So Kate was like, oh, we have to leave town now. And so they got on the lake, and they were on his little boat, and they tried to sail away, but his boat ended up getting shot. He ended up getting shot, and Kate ended up going crazy and killing a bunch of people after he had died. And so that was basically the story. And she had treasure that she buried that they found out. And so that's what they found out they're digging for. And so they kind of developed the story of that, and they're like, okay, well, we want to find this treasure. But his best friend now is Zero. Stanley's best friend is Zero. And Zero, people think that Zero is really dumb. They think there's nothing in his brain. So he doesn't like answering questions. And so they keep asking him all these questions about his life and stuff. And finally, he gets fed up with it, and he just leaves the camp. And at this camp, they don't try to stop you if you leave. They just let you go, because there's no water within miles and miles and miles. So they're like, okay, well, he'll just end up dying. And Stanley, he couldn't stand it, so he went after Zero, and he finds him under a boat, which is called the Mary Lou, and he finds him under there. And he was like, wait, Mary Lou kind of sounds familiar. It was the guy who had gotten shot. It was his boat. And so he got out from under the boat, and they climbed up this mountain. He called it the Big Thumb, which is like, it was a really big mountain. He figured that there might be water growing up there, because you could see plants, kind of like weeds and stuff, and there wasn't weeds anywhere because there's no water. He's like, maybe there's water up there. So they kept hiking and hiking the mountain. They finally found tons and tons and tons of onions, so that's why they had to live on for a few days, and water. And so they were finally like, you know what, we're going to leave camp. Or they said, we're going to go back to camp. So they start heading back down the mountain after they had gained their strength back, and so they start heading down the mountain. And when they get to camp, they start digging in a hole where he had found the little tube of, which now is lipstick that they find out that's what it was. And He starts digging in that hole, and they finally found the treasure. But as soon as he finds it, the warden shows up. And she's the one who wanted them to dig the holes in the first place to find this treasure. So now she's got him, and they have the treasure, but they won't give it to him. And Zero, they were like, why don't you want to give it to us? Like, it's ours, apparently. And Zero was like, well, it says Stanley Yelnats on the top of it. And so his, like, attorney general for the state of Texas shows up, and so does his lawyer. They all show up. And so they're there just kind of talking. They're like, well, he is supposed to be released today. And they had, like, files and stuff. They were like, can we have files on Zero, which his name was Hector. They're like, can we have files on Hector? And the camp had completely gotten rid of his files because they wanted him to be like, oh, he didn't exist, basically, after he ran away. So they took Zero and Stanley back, and the treasure ended up being Stanley's. So it was a bunch of stuff that had been his grandfather's, who was the one who put a curse on the family. But it all worked out in the end because the camp ended up getting busted, and all the counselors ended up getting busted for crimes. So that's Holes.